This video is going to be a film study look at Diontae Johnson's abbreviated 2024 season with the Carolina Panthers. I'm really only going to display film from 3 games, call it a film study / commentary in reality. I'm not necessarily going to annotate any of the plays. I think his stats kind of speak for itself. Additionally, when you look at the film, which I have at this point 3 complete games against the Raiders, Bengals, and Falcons from this year, essentially contests where he got a lot of targets and opportunities, and in some cases is winning against high-level corners. I do suspect that there is an element here that Diontae Johnson wins against man often. I think this trade is more so related to that and the value that we were able to get in return for essentially giving away nothing, I believe a 5th-round pick. More so than anything that happened on Sunday with Rashad Bateman or Zay Flowers. I think that Diontae Johnson threatens Nelson Aguilar's place on the field more so than Bateman or Zay Flowers, obviously. He's a professional, high-level receiver, starting experience. I think I look at him as the type of guy who could go 2 or 3 games and only have 5 catches on 6 or 7 targets. And then all of a sudden in a game, for whatever reason, if we find a matchup, a situation where he can exploit something, he could give us 8 catches for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's a veteran. Of course, we remember the years of him playing with the Steelers, giving us trouble at times. I think it's a good signing for the value that we got in return. Adding a depth piece, adding more depth, and building depth at the wide receiver position, and safeguarding us in the event of injury. If Bateman or Flowers was to go down, Diontae Johnson can clearly step in, start, play a lot of snaps as a run blocker. I don't know what we're getting there. I'm not willing to offer opinion on that. I have no idea. We're not getting much from Rashad Bateman in that regard either. I do think it's interesting that you have these teams that are sellers 7 or 8 games into the year, just giving away veteran talent that in some cases they had just signed 6 or 7 months ago. It's really interesting to me. And at the wide receiver position, look at all the talent that has crossed the country or crossed franchises. Davante Adams, Amari Cooper, and now Diontae Johnson going to the Ravens, regardless of how many targets or opportunities he gets. And they will be few and far between at times. Week by week, I think it will vacillate. This is tremendous value, in my opinion, to get leading into Week 9. I will let some film flow through. Like I said, I'm not necessarily going to annotate it or study it like I would in a particular film study video. In most film study videos, I think the film kind of speaks for itself. You'll see targets, some catches, some passes defense, like that one there by Jacorian Bennett on a slant. He played well against the Raiders team that we had just competed against the week before. In fact, I believe he had 122 yards receiving in this game. In Week 4 against Cincinnati, also played well, and we'll display some of that film here in a moment. I want to talk about his stats up to now and then what that would project as. First of all, inefficient in 2024 from a catch percentage standpoint. 30 of 58 catches for 357 yards and 3 touchdowns. If you were to extrapolate that out or do the math over the course of a 17-game season, if I did it right, I think it's 72 catches, 860 yards, 7 or 8 touchdowns. He's not going to produce that on the Ravens. I don't think that's why he's signed. We have too much talent, too many guys that will have an impact consistently every week for Diontae Johnson to come in and anyone himself, Diontae Johnson first and foremost, to think that there's any chance he's going to get 6 or 8 targets each game. But I do think there will be situations where we find matchups that he's either won before, because he is a veteran, he's been around for a while, even though at this point he's only 28 years old, where he'll be able to give us a 5 or 6 catch game for 90 yards and a touchdown or 2. He just looks like that kind of player to me on film. Showed off really well against the Bengals. I think 7 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown. Of course, the Panthers lost 34-24. Wins against man. That's an interesting dynamic here for me. And I think it was Danny in our Ravens Discord pointed it out first, so I got to give a shout out to him. Some of these wins against man, do they look different from our receivers against man? I'm not willing to go that far. But I will say this, he's very smooth. Catches the ball well, even though the catch percentage is lower. I think he's a career 58% catch guy, but I could be wrong there. One thing to note, the yards per catch this year is 11.9. Go back 1 year, though, to 2023, his last year in Pittsburgh. He not only averaged 14.1 yards per catch, but he had 37 first downs on 51 catches. Catch percentage of 58% a year ago, 2023, more efficient than what we got this year in Carolina. How much of that is their team? Meaning, How much of that is what the Panthers roster and scheme offers to him and maybe caps his potential? Some of the film that you see, in my opinion, shows a pretty capable player. I think this fits the Ravens' needs from the standpoint of building depth, an available starter caliber guy at receiver when we want to go 11 personnel, when we need to go 11 personnel. I wonder if this takes more snaps from Nelson Aguilar and Isaiah Likely compared to some of the other players that have been mentioned, meaning people are talking about Bateman having 2 drops on Sunday, and they were 2 drops. Nelson Aguilar had a big one as well on a 3rd and 5. In my opinion, this move may get Aguilar and at times Likely, even Ricard, off the field more often than Rashad Bateman. I think quarterback play probably had an impact, especially in the first 2 weeks. Go look at his stats in the first 2 weeks and even the gameplay, which I just watched straight through today. Drastically different quality of targets, let's put it that way, than when Andy Dalton was inserted into the lineup, I think week 3 or perhaps week 4. They got pass pro issues down there, scheme issues, I think multiple things. I'm not trying to criticize Carolina's staff or franchise too much. They're obviously in a sell situation. It would have been great for us if we could have picked up Diontae Johnson and Jadeveon Clowney in the same move, in my opinion. Ultimately, I do think that this brings obvious positives for us in 2024. It does cause problems for Walker and maybe even Tylan Wallace. I don't think Tylan Wallace's spot is really in danger. He plays on special teams. He does a nice job there. But from a receiver standpoint, it just moves all those guys further down the depth chart. You know, who stays, who goes, I personally really don't care. I just care that this gives us another quality player at that position that in the event of injury, because it is a long season and our bye is later on, I think week 13 or 14, somewhere in there, it gives us the ability, I think we can get the job done with this receiver group. He's tough on 3rd downs. He had 6 catches for 78 yards in this game against the Falcons, 1 touchdown. They obviously lost that game. He's got good reps, good snaps against high-level, good corners. A couple of them in this game against Terrell, number 24. Also in the Bengals game, showed well from a standpoint of being able to beat man. Smooth catcher of the football, even though the catch percentage is low, or this season, 51%. I understand that there'll be wildly different opinions or perspectives on the trade. It's not the one we expected, certainly not the one I expected. I was looking for us to try to move for a guard, but I'm not sure that there'll be teams that are willing to get rid of a guard, certainly not at this price, $600,000. It is interesting to me that NFL franchises sign these guys, or in some cases trade for them, and then before midseason, in the first year those guys are with the franchise, are trading them away. It's just such a weird dynamic, and I think it just tells us how blessed we are, even though we're 5-3 right now and we're all extremely frustrated. It tells us how blessed we are as Ravens fans that we don't necessarily get put in that position very often, meaning we sign a player through free agency or trade for them, and then halfway through the first year, we're jettisoning them to some other franchise. I really won't get into statistical projections. I think that's a waste of time. I've seen people almost arguing on social media about it, and it just shocks me a little bit. For $600,000 and a draft pick that really doesn't matter in most situations, we were able to secure a starting level receiver who will only probably play 25 to 30 snaps in most games. Occasionally there might be a time frame where we need him to play more snaps because of the dynamic, the situation. Sometimes you want to go against the other team's nickel defense. Sometimes you prefer to play against your base defense. There's no reason why he can't be out there in our 21 personnel group or our 22 personnel group at times when we want to throw the football. I like the signing. I understand that there are obvious weaknesses from a statistical standpoint, relative weaknesses, I should say, but when you watch the film, I see a guy that catches the ball smoothly with his hands, especially when in time, in rhythm, in flow, runs onto open space, in zone, beats man coverage often. I'm not saying he destroys man coverage in all instances, but I think I've shown you enough film here of him against man defenses. I'll also post it up on Twitter for people to check out as they wish. To spot shadow it on each particular play would have added time for me to try to produce this video. I was only able to get to it later Tuesday night. It caught me by surprise. I don't know about you. Let me know what you think in the comment section of when this occurred. It makes me wonder if there was conversations already happening between the Ravens and the Panthers, and this one came up as an opportunity like, hey, we could get this guy for very minimal draft stock, number one, and number two, only bringing on, I think, $620,000 or $630,000. Do I worry about the 53-man roster? No. I think there's guys on that 53-man roster that we don't have to have on the roster, Rasheen Ali being one of them. To me, being as we have Collier on the roster, and Keaton Mitchell will be coming back soon, clearly there is no room on this roster for Collier, Ali, and Mitchell to be around, barring anything like an injury to Derrick Henry or Justice Hill. That's my thoughts on the matter. Some film that I thought I would show or display that I think is illustrative of his ability level. He's not going to get 11 or 12 targets in a game with us, very rarely at least. So looking for an 8-catch, 120-yard game with a touchdown like I think we saw against the Raiders, or maybe it was 6 or 7 catches, I think that's unrealistic. That's not what he's coming to Baltimore to do. I think he's coming here to be a solid receiver who takes advantage of opportunities, and we put on the field on third downs. That, in my opinion, and I understand that others will have a drastically different reaction to this, the drop by Rashad Bateman with about 9.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter is huge. The sun obviously played a role. It's a huge drop. We have the ball, I think, down inside their 40, so we're pretty much almost in field goal range at that point. 5 or 6 yards puts us in a higher percent situation with Justin Tucker struggles recently. I think the drop that Nelson Aguilar had in the second quarter is just as big because it's 3rd and 5, and he's running open over the middle. And to me, there looks like another 10 to 12, 15 yards at minimum space for him to run onto. I think the coaching staff evaluated that play and saw the opportunity here with Diontae Johnson, and I think he's coming in to play the role of our number 3 receiver, unless there's some injury that we don't know about to Rashad Bateman or Zay Flowers, which I have no knowledge of or reason to think that to be the case. I'm just giving you what my opinion is in terms of Diontae Johnson's projected role and the player or players that I think he'll take snaps from the rest of the way out in the regular season. You guys are welcome to let me know if you have a different opinion or what thoughts I gave that you think are accurate or align up with what your perception is now that we've had some time to look at the film, number one, number two, and perhaps listen to other people's thoughts on the matter. I'm not nearly as negative as much of the reaction that I'm seeing on social media to this trade. It's certainly not the one that we expected, but I think it's one that adds depth and gives us more talent, more opportunities, more bullets to use in the event that we just have to outscore people because our defense continues to play so poorly. I appreciate you guys' time, man. If you think that other Ravens fans would enjoy this video, please consider grabbing a link to it, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach. Number one. Number two, if you've ever considered joining my Patreon where we discuss things like this pretty much instantly in a controlled environment, meaning no trolls from outside fan bases that are interjecting about how sorry a player is that their team just had a year ago. I'm talking about Steelers fans. If you would be interested in joining some type of community like that, it's $5 a month to support me on Patreon, and that gets you access to the Ravens Discord that has, at this point, about 94 people in it, and there's considerable amount of discussion pretty much 24/7. Appreciate you guys' time.